Now, I showed you what John Howard said about the Scott Morrison secret ministry saga. Tony Abbott had his say on this as well on Paul Murray Live last night, and he couldn't defend the indefensible either.
I'm not going to defend what was done. I'm just not going to defend what was done. On the other hand, we've got a report from the Solicitor General. It clearly says that there was nothing illegal done, but it also clearly indicates that it is just highly unconventional, highly unorthodox, and shouldn't have happened. In the end, what you rely upon from heads of government and ministers and everyone in authority is good, sensible behaviour. And when you don't get good, sensible behaviour, the best recourse is through the political process. And I suppose that's what we've seen happen in Australia.
Let me welcome to the studio Coalition frontbencher and former Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce. Thanks for joining us, Barnaby.
It's an absolute pleasure. Chris.
How can you move on from this issue until Scott Morrison actually apologises to the Parliament and the public?
Well, he's rung his colleagues, I believe, and those who were involved and not involved, and apologised to them. And I think that's probably a reasonable request. You've got to have a mea culpa, and the Labor Party are using this for all they can. The Labor Party have turned themselves into an opposition in exile. They're back onto sort of personality politics and are avoiding the process of being held to account for government, which is, the price of fuel, the price of electricity, price of groceries, China breathing down our neck to the north. We've got to get back to that agenda because that's what the nation needs us to talk about. This issue can be sorted toot sweet. You just bring in the legislation, everything's got to be gazetted when it's done. And I think a sort of cathartic moment for Scott would probably help, yeah.
Yeah, so it can be fixed easily. Labor are making a meal of it, there's no doubt about it. But you agree then that Scott Morrison, though, in order to try and put it behind the coalition, in order for the coalition to move on, the political debate to move on, Scott Morrison should apologise. In what shape and to whom?
I don't think it has to be grandiose, a simple statement. And that, I wouldn't put it, I'd probably say he's considering that himself and probably going to do it. It's a simple statement to the House and that would be it. I mean, I don't believe in this sort of flaying people alive. He did nothing illegal. It might have been politically improper, but nothing illegal. And so people saying, he should be kicked out of Parliament, very bad precedent. Kicking people out of Parliament for something that's not illegal everybody's going to have their time of being, potentially kicked out of Parliament. So, and the Labor Party should watch themselves too, because what goes around comes around. Yeah,
right. It doesn't need to be a flaying. I mean, he's done a lot of damage to Scott Morrison as it is, but it's continuing to do damage to the coalition. But the point here is what we've heard mainly from Scott Morrison in his press conference and his statements is attempted justification of his action. Now, we've heard all that. Doesn't he need to recognise that, admit that this was a mistake because it hid government from accountability, it kept the Parliament and the public in the dark, and it shouldn't happen again? That way people will happily move on, surely.
Yeah, look, there's not one person I've heard that thought it was a good idea. Every person from Peter Dutton to the first time I realised the extent that it was there. I realised there was a difference in opinion on PEP 11 with Keith Pitt, but we've got to move on from it, and and I think the Australian people want us to move on from it, and part of the process is to accept medicine, and you don't justify it, you say sorry for it and move on.
Now, onto the Indigenous voice. You once called it a third chamber. You admitted that was a mistake and you apologised for that. Is it good enough for the coalition? Is it plausible for the coalition just to run blanket opposition to an Indigenous voice, or would it be most sensible to work with the government to try and make sure it's as practical and constitutionally safe as possible?
Well, I think the issue here, Chris, is that Mr Albanese has been out, right? He's talking about this is a corruption of the process of government in regards to the ministerial issue, and he wants full transparency. But the Australian people haven't got full transparency on exactly what this referendum is going to look like. And that's the powerful word, referendum is going to look like. And this idea, you just agree to it and leave the detail up to me, is just not going to fly.
But isn't the crucial detail the actual constitutional amendment? That's the thing that really matters, and you've got to propose one out there now. You either agree with that or suggest changes.
Well, it's it's got to be fully fleshed out. We've got to see what the implications are. Anything that's in the Constitution is read by the High Court and interpreted. It doesn't just stop there. So, we've got a Constitution that has been part of a country that's never had a civil war, that's never had really major social strife. Therefore, it's a document that works. And I'm not saying in Australia, you change and you'll have a civil war, so stop that. So, but I'm just saying it's a document that works, so be really careful what you do to it. And we are not being prudent if you just say, oh, well, this sounds good, looks good, therefore off we go. No,
you've got to be careful. But do you believe it's beyond our remit to get that right as a country? If we want to do it, if we want to say the Parliament has special powers to make laws for Indigenous people, it also should get some non-binding advice from them. Is that too hard, or ought we be able to do it?
I do have concerns about it, Chris, to be honest. Like, I just the concept that certain DNA differentiates people in Australia, I don't like that. I feel uncomfortable with that. I feel it's been very dangerous historically. Remember, these sort of processes are outlawed in Germany and Italy.
But you understand it's not really about race, right? It's really about links to the first Australians. It's indigeneity, which is a different thing. I know it's kind of a technical argument, but the point is that Indigenous people, through native title rights and the like, have certain rights to this land that the rest of us don't.
Fair enough, and I understand that, and everything becomes an argument, Chris, for an extent as to what the ramifications are.
Yep.
And, where... And what I worry about, to be quite frank, Chris, what I worry about is when the left drive these issues, where they start and where they end is something entirely different. We saw that with the Republic debate. Once they get hold of it, they drive it to their agenda, and then it becomes hellishly dangerous.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why I'd like the Conservatives to help to shape it and make it as safe as possible. We'll continue the discussion, but I do need to move on. I want to ask you about Labor's plan being floated now. They're happy to consider doubling the number of senators from the 2 territories, from 2 to 4. Surely this is just a plan that will make the Senate even more unrepresentative, have more Greens and Labor people there.
More Greens and Labor people there. And I've said it before, if you actually want Aboriginal people, and they call it Aboriginal in my area, and I'm very proud of it because many Aboriginal people in my electorate as I have farmers. So if you want true Aboriginal representation, we don't need a referendum. We can do it by ledge because within the Constitution, the allocation of senators is the state is to be considered one electorate, and here comes the crucial word, until the Parliament otherwise decides. So you could go to areas where the issues, where especially big social issues are, whether that's Cape York or the Gulf or Western New South Wales, make it a region by ledge, and you can bet your life that'd be Aboriginal senators.
They could have their own separate sort of senatorial electorates. That's a fascinating idea, but that's got a long way to go. In the meantime, we shouldn't be increasing the number of senators, should we?
What are you going to have it from the ACT? Let's be frank. You're going to get either more Teal types or Labor senators. This is obviously delivering back to themselves. For the Northern Territory, well, I don't know. We'll see which way that goes. But the ACT, I mean, God, they've got a Parliament. They've got how much more government does one little pocket of land need?
Indeed. Look, we've run out of time to talk about the Job Summit. We'll get onto that later on. Thanks for joining us, Barnaby.
You're welcome, Chris.